So, as you would have heard from reports, Andy Burnham has been secretly urged by some Labour MPs to return to Westminster politics in order to eventually challenge Keir Starmer's Labour leadership. Now, he needs to be an MP first, and I don't know if there's any safe seats left for Labour. But the right wing of the party, and actually, I don't know if that's an accurate term to say anymore, because that suggests there's a left-wing faction. I mean, that's pretty much long gone. So the Starmer faction have already attacked Burnham. Arch Blairite and Corbyn hater Neil Coyle said, "Not me. The annual Burnham wants to be leader headlines just before conference are more grating this year. He didn't take on the guy who oversaw Labour's worst defeat in a century and facilitated anti-Semitism, but pops up now under a huge majority and with 4 years to go. No tar." So there we go with the bogus anti-Semitism accusations, once again making the rubbish claim that Jeremy Corbyn facilitated it. He is now attacking Burnham by proxy because he didn't join in on the Zionist attacks. Now Burnham, for many political disagreements I have with him, I mean, he was loyal. He didn't engage in the backstabbing of Jeremy Corbyn. He actually wanted a Labour government, unlike many in the party. Now, according to HuffPost journalist Kevin Schofield, he tweeted this: "Currently doing the rounds in Labour WhatsApp groups, and as you can see, it's a photoshopped image of Burnham and Truss merged together." Now, this is the use of client journalists, by the way. Coward snakes that are Labour MPs won't say it with their chest, right? They'd rather send messages like this to their favourite journalists to share about. It's really, really pathetic stuff. Now, Keir Starmer has also joined in on the attacks. According to Christopher Hope, gloves now off in Starmer v Burnham. So Keir, speaking to ITV Granada, said he would not get drawn into commenting on the mayor's personal ambitions, but added, "I do want to be really clear about our fiscal rules, because economic stability is the foundation stone of this government." It was 3 years ago this week that Liz Truss showed what happens if you abandon fiscal rules. In her case, she did that for tax cuts, but the same would happen if it was spending. And yes, we saw what happened to working people 3 years ago, the infliction of harm on them. So that's Starmer effectively calling Burnham Liz Truss. I mean, Labour need to get better at their insults. They call everyone they disagree with Liz Truss. It's utterly embarrassing. Also, it's a shameful lie. I mean, he's trying to compare Truss for giving tax breaks away to a wealthy mates, comparing that with long-term investment. Now, the fiscal rules are made up garbage. It's neoliberal and Thatcherite nonsense. Now, Andy Burnham spoke to The Telegraph about building a different kind of economy. Mr. Burnham laid out the building blocks of a tax and spend manifesto that would be more radical than anything Sir Keir Starmer's government has yet proposed. He said, "We overtax labour, people's work, and we undertax people's assets." Mr. Burnham would like to make the owners of valuable homes in the South pay more tax. He said that leaving the council tax system as it would not be an acceptable response when you live here in the real world, where councils are now really struggling. Mr. Burnham added, "There are people in homes in London that are worth double-figure millions paying less council tax than people here. It's just not justifiable." The Manchester mayor also wants to take action to stop developers sitting on land. He said, "I'm personally a big supporter of land value taxation." Now, I really, really like this. The left is moving the debate on taxes. We've been talking about wealth taxes, targeting passive income from assets, targeting unproductiveness in our economy. People are getting rich by adding zero social value. Tax wealth, not work. So we are shifting the debates where it's now being picked up by centre-left figures such as Andy Burnham. Now, this tweet from Tom Tague, summarising Burnham's thinking on the economy, is really interesting. Burnham believes there are two core reasons we're so vulnerable to bond markets. One, we've lost control of public spending through privatisation. Two, first past the post creates fragile governments unable to reform the system. So, fix both to end Britain's structural vulnerability, not ignore it. And that's exactly what Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer is doing. They're ignoring all of it. They're ignoring privatisation. They're just going ahead with it. So this is a very good point. First past the post is unstable, despite the fact that this voting system was justified by many that, oh, it created stable governments. That's no longer true. And secondly, he is bang on about privatization. It's a ripoff. The Treasury is literally spending more money paying back the debts of PFI. But crucially, private investment isn't stable. When we give everything away through private contracts, we have to trust that the private sector will adequately invest. But that doesn't often happen because the priority for companies is to keep their shareholders happy, not the public. State-led investment is predictable. It's much more stable. Now, Burnham isn't even on the radical left. He is traditionally the soft or centre-left wing of the Labour Party, yet Starmer's team will happily attack him because ultimately the Blairites, the Morgan McSweeneys of the party, are hyper-factional. They are a right-wing clique. They are terrible people. Terrible, nasty, clueless, uninspiring, and incompetent. And they're also deeply unpopular. So look at the polling. Labour are doing abysmally, yet a hypothetical poll with Andy Burnham as leader has Labour back in pole position. More in Common found Reform on 28% to Labour on 25%. Burnham as leader, Labour on top with 30%, and Reform are still on 28%. So do you see Reform swing it to Labour? No, not at all. They stay exactly still, but left-wing parties drop. It's as if it confirms everything we've been saying, that Labour moving right hurts them, but moving left, they may win back voters who left them for the Greens and the Lib Dems. Kevin, Andy Burnham is talking about policies such as higher taxes on the rich, nationalisation, which most people support. He's also much more popular, yet the Labour machine want to shut him out. Do you think that Starmer and his team would much rather lose the next election and give it to Reform than allow the party to move to the left?
Oh, absolutely, yes. The petulant, spiteful, and childish response that we've seen from Starmer et al. And their client journalists, as you rightly point out, shows how absolutely unfit they are for office, first and foremost, and how completely out of their depth they are. They are currently so far behind in the polling that some of the seat projections have them in third place. They wouldn't even be the official opposition for the first time in a century. Think about that. That is historic levels of unpopularity. Way worse than the supposedly worst result ever of 2019. But yeah, like you point out, they clearly are so unbelievably factional that they would rather see the Labour Party die than their own faction lose out in any way whatsoever. And I was thinking about this today, and it goes beyond just Starmerism needing to die. And this will be sort of repeated throughout this show because of the other two stories. Blairism needs to die. And that's fundamentally the problem here, is that what we have is reheated Blairism. We have a 20th century policy prescription for a now mid 21st century situation. And they don't really seem to care about that. When you just outsource your policy making to a dinosaur war criminal, this is the nonsense you end up with, you know? Starmerism, like I say, really needs to die, first and foremost. Whether Andy Burnham is necessarily the solution to this, I have my doubts. But given the kind of petty, small-minded cliqueism of the likes of McFadden and McSweeney, I'm actually just perfectly on board with Burnham going for it. Like, I don't necessarily like him or necessarily want him to be prime minister, but he has so much more of a grasp of the situation, so much more in touch with reality than Keir Starmer is, that I'm happy to go with it, at least for the time being. I don't think he's the answer to the problems, but he's at least has some grasp that there is a problem, rather than just tootling along pretending like it's absolutely fine. Because unfortunately, Tony Blair never really left office, and that needs to cease immediately. Now, as to your point about whether Burnham could necessarily get a Labour seat because there aren't any safe Labour seats, that's basically true. In most parts of the country, there are no safe Labour seats anymore, including the Prime Minister's own seat in Holborn and St Pancras in London. But if there's one place and one person that I think could definitely, absolutely run an election, even at this time with Labour so badly in the polls, it's in Manchester with Andy Burnham. So if he could get one of the Manchester MPs to step aside, Andy Burnham's a very popular man in Manchester. He's been a very popular mayor, and Labour traditionally do very well in Manchester. So there's certainly I think, more amenable to a more left-wing leader potentially going down to London with the North's interests at heart, and potentially usurping the London clique of technocratic madmen who have taken over the party. So I think he could do it. I think he definitely could do it. It's whether the Starmerite blade wielders, metaphorically speaking, are able to sort of kill him with 1,000 cuts before any of that takes place, or whether he even has the kind of the gumption to do it. Because ultimately, he's not really a left winger. He doesn't really seem to have that much fight in him. What he is a kind of Blairite who realised that Blairism doesn't really work anymore, and that's something.
I mean, even though it's unlikely that Burnham becomes leader, I said he needs to win a seat first. Manchester's probably the only place he could. I mean, do you think the interjection can help move the Overton window left? So even if he doesn't get leader,
Yeah.
doesn't get a seat, just having these discussions,
Yeah.
will that move it to the left? Or do you think actually the media will talk about this for a while and then just move on?
Well, I think undoubtedly it moves things to the left. What we've seen is with the constant rightward drift is because the Reform Party have pulled the Tory Party that way, Brexit pulled the country to a certain degree that way, and so the Labour Party have followed suit. And we haven't really had a left wing pushback to that. We've seen that with, I think, Zach Polanski being elected as the leader of the Green Party and eating into Labour's vote has definitely made them consider left wing voters a little more, not necessarily massively so. But if you have this insurgency from a traditionally left leaning city and a policy platform from Andy Burnham, one thing that the Labour Party will have to do is react to that. You can't just pretend and do silly think tank memes to your client journalists. You have to actually respond to that. And so what we've seen with the rightward pull of the popularity of people like Nigel Farage, I think you will definitely see a leftward pull with the popularity of the Green Party rising and their membership rising, and indeed the Left Party, or your party or whatever, which has not come off to a great start, but is definitely has the potential to become a significant force on the left, again dragging votes away from Labour Party, and this insurgency from Manchester, that we have essentially three big strings that we can pull the Labour Party left with. Now, I don't expect them to be any good, but at the very least, if it can stop some of the excesses, like we're about to see with the second story in a second, of the Labour Party and their awful right-wing policy prescriptions, that will be for the betterment of the country, and hopefully buy some amount of time for a proper left-wing alternative to be developed.
If this was a scenario that was plausible, would you like to see that happen? Would you like Andy Burnham to be the leader? Or do you think that actually Andy Burnham being leader may save the Labour Party, but a lot of us are fed up with it? Because I think for me, I'll let you answer, but for me, I think in terms of overall politics and the Overton window, Andy Burnham would be good as Labour leader. Like it'd be good for politics. But at the same time, you're undoubtedly going to see some of the votes in the Green Party may go back to Labour. Polling shows that. And I'm also kind of thinking, well, actually, Labour have had their chance to do that. I want the smaller parties to do well. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's good? It may be good for national politics, but it's a short-term thing because it could be at the cost of smaller parties.
Well, I mean, this is sort of the conundrum we have with electoral politics in general, is that all of the parties, even like, I mean, I'm a member of the Green Party, and I think they're the better of any of
Yeah.
the parties available. But even they, at their best, are still a sticking plaster. Ultimately, what you actually need is socialism, and they're not actually a socialist party;
Yeah.
they're social democratic, right? But that's a significant step forward from the current situation we find ourselves in. And so, if we're going to engage in electoral politics and we think that's worthwhile, then the best you can realistically do is a certain amount of incrementalism for the time being, whilst you try and develop, dual systems of power and all of that sort of thing. So ultimately, do I prefer Andy Burnham to become the Prime Minister over Keir Starmer? Frankly, the reheated corpse of Tony Benn would be preferable to Keir Starmer. Nobody would be preferable to Keir Starmer. It wouldn't make any difference. They would be just as charismatic if it was literally no person. So yes, I think Andy Burnham would be a better choice. Now, always be wary of a former Blairite offering you nice things before an election. Now, whether he would actually follow through with that, whether the party establishment would allow him to follow through with that, whether the bureaucracy of the nation would allow him to follow through with any of those things is a different story. But at least if he tries, I'll give him some credit on that, and I think it will have been a worthwhile experiment. If only for the reason that if he does implement some kind of leftist platform, even if it's just a kind of very, very milk toast one, and is successful in rejuvenating the popularity of the Labour Party, even just a little bit, what that shows is that actually that kind of policy platform is potentially successful in a way that we haven't seen. Because ultimately, what has worked for the Labour Party is Blairism, right? Blair got elected in 97 and 2001 and 2005. His heir, as it were, got elected in 2024. That's the only success that within living memory, pretty much, the Labour Party has known. And so to have a countervailing narrative where a left-wing progressive platform and a decent platform where, maybe they push back a little bit against the genocide and maybe they nationalize one or two things and, maybe, don't go so hard on the authoritarian technocratic nonsense and are successful in doing so, provides that example of, oh, actually, this is successful. This can work, and that can only be for the good of the left within that electoral system. Again, it's never going to be the solution to the problem because the system is set up to deny us that solution. What we need is to work beyond that system as well. But for the time being, Andy Burnham is undoubtedly an infinitely better prospect than Keir Starmer, who's just like, honestly, I think he's the worst prime minister outside of maybe Thatcher, who was just inside my lifetime of my lifetime.